Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the legal recipe that turns a simple promise into a binding contract. So, what exactly does it take for a casual agreement to become something the law will actually enforce?
Yeah, we've all been there, right? Someone says they'll do something, and then nothing. But from a legal perspective, what's the real difference between a casual promise that's broken and one you can actually do something about?
Okay, so at first glance, a promise and a contract can look pretty similar. On one side, I'll help you move on Saturday. That's just a nice thing to do for a friend, right? A social courtesy. But then look at the other side. When you add in that exchange, that $100, the whole dynamic just shifts. And that's when we start stepping out of the world of casual promises and into the realm of legally binding contracts.
So, what's the secret ingredient here? Well, spoiler alert, it's not just one thing. Turning a promise into a contract, it's a lot like following a really specific legal recipe. You've got these precise ingredients, these exact steps, and if you miss even one of them, the whole thing can just fall apart. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so every single contract out there, I don't care if it's a multi-million-dollar deal or just buying something online, it all starts with two fundamental ingredients. These two things come together to form what the law calls an agreement, and believe me, it is the absolute bedrock of any contract.
So here it is, the basic formula. Offer plus acceptance equals an agreement. You literally can't have a contract without it. One person has to make a really clear offer, and the other person has to accept that exact offer. It sounds super simple, right? But oh boy, the details really matter.
So what is an offer, really? It's not just some vague idea like, hey, maybe we should sell this car sometime. Nope, it's a clear, definite proposal. I will sell you this car for $5,000. It's got to be made with the real intention of being legally bound the second the other person says yes. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. There's a huge difference between an offer and what's called an invitation to make an offer. Think about that price tag on a shirt in a store. You might think the store is offering to sell it to you, but legally, that's not what's happening. That price tag is an invitation for you to make an offer to buy it at that price. It's a subtle distinction, I know, but it's absolutely crucial in contract law. And this idea leads to a special kind of offer, the general offer. The classic example is a lost dog poster with a reward. That's an offer made to the entire world. Anyone who finds the dog, knows about that poster, and brings it back has legally accepted the offer. They're entitled to that reward money. This whole principle was famously hammered out in this wild old case about a company that promised a cash reward to anyone who used their smoke ball product and still caught the flu. The court said, yep, that ad was a valid offer.
Okay, so you've got a clear offer. What's next? The second core ingredient, acceptance. And this has to be a crystal clear, unconditional yes. I mean, if you try to change the terms at all, like saying, I accept, but I'll only pay half that price, well, that's not acceptance. That's a counteroffer, and it completely blows up the original proposal.
All right, on to the next major piece of the puzzle. Just having an agreement isn't quite enough. For a contract to be legit, it has to be a two-way street. It can't be a one-sided gift. And this is where the idea of a price for the promise comes in.
You've probably heard this Latin phrase before, quid pro quo. It literally means something for something. And it's the absolute heart of this whole concept. Each side has to give something, and each side has to get something of value. This something is what the law calls consideration.
Essentially, consideration is the price of the promise. But here's the thing. That price doesn't have to be cash. It can be an action, like mowing someone's lawn. It can be a service, like designing a website. It can even be a promise not to do something. The key is that both parties are giving up something that has some kind of value in the eyes of the law.
And this price can be paid at different times. It can be something you do right now, in the present, like handing over cash for a cup of coffee. It can be a promise to do something in the future, like agreeing to pay for a car when it's delivered next week. And in some legal systems, it can even be based on something you've already done in the past, though that one can get a little tricky. Okay, so let's recap. You've got an agreement, that's your offer and acceptance. And you've got consideration, that's the something for something. You're almost at the finish line. But to be a legally enforceable contract, your agreement has to pass one last final quality control check.
And here's the final formula you need to know. Agreement plus enforceability by law equals a contract. Your agreement only gets to be called a real contract when it meets all the legal requirements for enforceability. Think of these as the final non-negotiable checkpoints.
So what does enforceability even mean? Well, the very first checkpoint is all about who is making the deal. The law is very clear that all parties have to have the legal capacity to make a contract. And the most basic requirement for this is age. In most places, you have to be at least 18 years old, the age of majority.
Okay, so first up on our checklist is the who. This is all about the people involved. Are they legally capable? Meaning, are they old enough and of sound mind? Was their consent given freely? This is huge. You can't be forced or tricked or unfairly pressured into a contract. And maybe most importantly, did they actually intend for this to be a serious legal thing? You know that casual promise to a friend to grab lunch? It usually fails this last test because nobody's thinking about suing each other if it falls through.
Next up, we have the what checklist. This looks at the agreement itself. Number 1, is the purpose legal? I mean, a contract to commit a crime is obviously not going to hold up in court. Number 2, are the terms clear? A vague promise to paint a house for a fair price might be too fuzzy to enforce. And finally, is it even possible to do what you promised? An agreement to, say, travel back in time is void from the get-go because it's just plain impossible.
So, what happens if an agreement fails one of these essential checks? Well, its legal status changes. It might not be the ironclad deal you thought it was. Let's look at how the law classifies these different outcomes.
Right, so based on that whole checklist, a contract can end up in one of 3 buckets. First, it can be valid, which means it's perfect. It ticked all the boxes and is fully enforceable. Then, it can be voidable. This means one of the parties has the option to cancel it. For example, if they were forced to sign it. And finally, it can be void. This means it was never a real contract at all. It's a total non-starter, like any agreement made with a minor.
So to wrap it all up, it really does come back to that recipe analogy. You absolutely need the core ingredients, an offer and an acceptance. You need the price of that promise, which we call consideration. And then the whole thing has to pass that strict legal quality control check to be a real enforceable contract.
So now that you know the recipe, just think about it for a second. How many contracts do you think you enter into every single day? Buying your morning coffee? Tapping your car to get on the bus? Clicking I agree on some website's terms and conditions? These legal rules aren't just for big corporations. They are silently and constantly shaping our daily lives in way more ways than you probably realize.